Hi, I'm Diana, and I'm sitting here today with managing partner Sandra Ziskind and our head of civil litigation, Nadia Condotta. We're discussing a heavy topic today. We're discussing sexual assault, and we're discussing how Diamond and Diamond can help people in civil claims get some sort of recourse or get some sort of acknowledgement for the trauma that they endured. Where does somebody start after they've been sexually assaulted? Like what do they do first? Because obviously there's like immediate trauma. So
right. So obviously the first thing to do is to go to the police and report it to the police. Sexual assault is obviously a criminal act, and there's different levels of sexual assault under the criminal code, and depending on how badly basically the person, I mean, you can sexually assault somebody and they could die. Mm-hmm. So there's all sorts of different levels of charges that you could go to with the sexual assault. Where we step in, and what often happens with sexual assault is sexual assault and domestic violence are the two hardest things for the prosecutors to prosecute in court, because what happens with sexual assault in particular is it's a he said, she said. So, and then the bar for proving them is beyond a reasonable doubt. So if you have something where somehow they think there may or may not have been consent, they're not sure, then you must acquit the person, because it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, because you're sending somebody to jail. So oftentimes what happens is people who go through this process of reporting the sexual assault go to with the prosecutor, it fails. I mean, I've had a case like that where the woman young girl was brutally sexually assaulted on school property, and it was a horrible situation. So he was acquitted because she didn't come forward right away, and there was all sorts of mitigating factors. It was a horrible situation. And she was, it was clear that she was sexually assaulted. So we started a claim for her damages from the sexual assault, which is something that we can do at Diamond and Diamond. So the difference is when we're doing a civil lawsuit, we don't have that bar of beyond a reasonable doubt. We only have a preponderance of the evidence. So when you have a preponderance of, is it more likely than not to have happened? It's easier to get some form of justice for these mainly women. So they have their sort of day in court.
That's really interesting. Nadia, how long would somebody have, especially in that case, what you're saying with Sandra, once the first, I guess, the acquittal goes through, whatever, when you want to push through, how long would somebody have to even make a claim of that nature?
So unlike all the other civil claims, there's actually no limitation period with sexual assault. So even if it's not reported to the police, and this is how civil law can kind of get around that issue that they have in criminal court, if it's not reported to the police, there's no limitation period. So we often see claims that
it's not reported to the police.
Even if it's not reported.
Even if it's not reported.
Yeah. So we often see claims that, are 40, 50 years old.
Wow.
Because we're dealing with a historical sexual assault. Something happened decades ago where the person was not comfortable to report it. It wasn't something that was out. I mean, even now it's not reported very often. Everybody's trying to destigmatize it for the victims.
Right.
It's important for the historical sexual assault specifically that they got rid of this limitation period, because what happens is over time, people repress these memories, especially as a child. You're sexually assaulted as a child, and they repress these memories. And I know I can speak colloquially. We've seen when men get raped as children, especially, they are more lax to come forward. There's an embarrassment. There's a sense of embarrassment that comes forward. And we have had male sexual assault victims as well. And they come forward 20, 30 years later. They repress these memories. They're repressed it psychologically. Their life has turned out in the worst way possible. And then they trace it back to the original sexual assault. So it gives them a chance to get some sort of justice and compensation for what they've suffered as a result. 15,
20 years, 50 years, you even said, where they come back and they say, this happened to me. What do you do in the instance that, that the aggressor is still alive, they're still out there, or the whoever the person of authority is still out there? What do you do in the instance where it's like I guess you would still start with the police, and then what if that person just says that never happened? How are you going to prove I did that 15 to 50 years ago?
I mean, it's still a he said, she said. That's the sad truth of it.
Right.
You kind of have to take people's evidence as it comes. You have to assess the evidence one way or the other. And oftentimes you can look to the person's life. There is a point in their life where they didn't necessarily report it to a doctor or a counselor, whatever.
Yeah.
But there was a turn. They started self-medicating with alcohol or drugs. So as long as that, kind of goes along with what they're telling you, again, you take the evidence.
It's not the easiest thing to reconstruct.
Right. Because now you're drawing out that trauma from that person. And you're like, I need you to go see, I guess you would send them to a therapist to try to draw that out and try to figure out where
But
it
I remember
started.
a case I had, for example, where a young girl, CAS failed to remove her from a home, and she had a STD at 6. And, we didn't do the lawsuit until the woman was 40.
Right.
But it was documented somewhere along the line that she did have an STD at 6. So now that evidence becomes something that pushes it more towards it did happen. I know a sexual assault that I dealt with personally also, she didn't report it right away, which is one of the reasons the criminal case did not come to fruition. However, she tried to kill herself at some point, which is also very common, unfortunately, with sexual assault victims. And she recounted what happened during that period. So we're looking for places where they've told people what have happened along the line. And, you wouldn't, if you're trying to kill yourself at that point because of the psychological damage and you're telling them it's because of the psychological damage, that's evidence in the lawsuit.
Right.
It's more of a correlation of events.
Correct. And, or she had to have surgery because, I don't want to get into details, but there was some damage done in the genitalia area, and she had to have surgery a year after the fact. All of these things start to add up, and then it becomes, yes, this is more likely than not to have happened. It definitely is hard as time goes on to get the documents and to get the documentation, but that's part of our job to try and find it.
That's what I wanted to add. That was one of the things you kind of answered. It was like, what can a victim or a client of ours expect to occur? Because I know with motor vehicle accidents, we say your life becomes an open book now.
Correct.
Now we need to know, did you file your tax? How much money you made, and your medical records from 5 years. But what can somebody, aside from that, what are you looking for? You guys are going to be requesting things from?
A lot of the same.
Yeah.
But oftentimes there aren't medical records because this isn't something that people report.
Right.
Or the medical records are older than 10 years old.
Right.
So we can't get our hands on the medical records. It's more difficult to prove damages the same. You can't prove damages the same way you would in an MVA or a slip and fall.
Because it's not it's not a recent thing that's happened, right?
Exactly.
And it's a little bit more difficult.
Not quantifiable.
And what happens is also, unfortunately, victims of sexual assault, especially pedophilia, tend to be multiple victims. So they usually, a lot of times, they don't get sexually assaulted once, they get sexually assaulted multiple times. So then you're trying to correlate which sexual assault led to which damage, which makes it very difficult.
Right.
One thing pedophiles are very, very good at is sniffing out their victims and figuring out who they should prey on. And they do it over and over again. So it's not uncommon to see a person who has been sexually assaulted as a child to be subsequently sexually assaulted and taken advantage of throughout their lifetime. Right. So now that person is drug dependent, alcohol dependent, unable to work, unable to function in society.
Yeah, they just kind of fall through the cracks too, I guess.
100%.
Right?
100%.
They're not.
But what caused it?
Right.
Was it the initial? Was it the second? Was it the third? So it's not the easiest thing to do. We've done it with a lot of success, but it's not the easiest thing to do. And we have specialists that we use to help us sort of delineate where the damage occurred from.
At what point, and so to correlate it to where that person was, if they went to X, religious place or whatever, or CAS, as you said. I know with sexual assault, you have the criminal case, right? That you're going to go after this person and get them charged and hopefully put in jail, hopefully. In terms of like an actual claim though, in terms of a civil claim, where does Diamond and Diamond, where can Diamond and Diamond help somebody who's been, if it's a husband-wife scenario, or if it's a a religious leader and a student kind of thing, or if it's, somebody who's within the system, where can Diamond and Diamond step in and really maybe help them with any kind of financial compensation in that case?
I'll let you take this one.
Okay. It's a little bit harder if it's a person who you're going after, right. Especially in the context where we are kind of looking is in the context of, an institutional sexual assault. There is a body, a school board, a church, CAS, where these institutions, an employer. These places have a duty to care for the people in their charges who are vulnerable, who rely on these people, who trust these people. They have a vicarious liability for the people that they are responsible for. So the church has a responsibility for the priests. CAS has a responsibility for the families that they place these children with.
Right.
If the victim is assaulted by these people in positions of power, we can go after the institution. That, I think, it's really the best way to help some of these people.
And money is not, listen, we can only do money,
right?
We can psychologically.
Yeah,
all we can do is money. We are not in a position to put anyone in jail because we don't do criminal law. So all we can do is money and compensation. However, I will say, in one of my sexual assault cases, she got an apology. And I have to tell you, even though we got her money, and that money did help her rebuild her life, and she's gone on to do great things, and I'm super proud of her. She still keeps in touch with me. The apology was the most profound part of the whole settlement. When that
It's worth a lot more than
It's
money.
worth more than anything. When they got up and said to her, "I'm sorry this happened to you," she collapsed in the defendant's arms. Like, she collapsed in their arms because it was just finally somebody acknowledging it.
Yeah.
And she got a little bit of closure. Correct.
Yeah.
So in that case, it was a school board that we went after for not failing to protect her. And it was the school board representative that was there. But just that acknowledgement by an outside person saying, "We believe you. We know this happened. We're sorry this happened to you. We acknowledge this happened to you," because she didn't get that in criminal court.
Yeah. Criminals just very like, this is you're guilty,
Correct.
whatever. And
But if you can't get a conviction because of the same problems we talked about, this is the next best thing.
Right.
And it's not great and we can't take it away, but it's something, and it gives them something to rebuild and perhaps start again, perhaps go back to university, perhaps go back to college, perhaps use the money to do something productive
for themselves. And
Correct.
Yeah, because they've been living their life and, with this trauma.
For a lot of people, this is cathartic. This is somebody's listening to me. I'm able to tell my story now.
Right.
And that's a big part of it as well. Even if you don't get anything out of it other than, some money and being able to tell your story.
What, being a feminist myself, and I know Nadia is a feminist also, I think we always tend to, we believe the victim, whether they're female or male.
Yeah.
And we've seen time and time again, victims not being able to get their voice heard in court.
Yeah.
And we've seen the perpetrators are smart, and they're smarter, and they're doing things.
And plus, you throw the internet in them and you throw this. And
so for example, one case I had, the guy sent out a text message the next day saying that they had sex and they broke up. Right. So he was like almost documenting that it was a relationship when it was clearly not.
Yeah.
But it was almost like he knew to sort of cover his tracks already. Right. They're getting more sophisticated with these things, or calling, the slut shaming is always the big one, right? We call the woman the hoe or the slut. And that way, oh no, you can't rape a slut or a hoe, right? That's sort of so they go onto social media, they go onto these outlets and start publicly shaming these women.
It's so awful.
And it's also an intimidation tactic to keep them from moving forward with a lawsuit, with their criminal stuff, because now they've been publicly shamed. And so
now there's too many people.
There's too many people, and everybody knows, and everyone has to know. And then it becomes very debilitating. It's very debilitating. It's not, these victims are the most difficult for us to deal with, in the sense that if they're coming forward to us, it takes a lot of bravery and a lot of courage, more than I would say any other victims in our firm. And this is not a money thing. But again, money's our only way of,
and we commend them for their courageous, like, for coming forward and
100%.
telling you detailed stories and having access to their men and all that stuff. So it's, they entrust us to do it, and we're happy to help in any way we can. Always.
100%.
I think that's I think that's the main mantra of
100%.
We can.
If we can, we will.
Right.
100%.
Right.
And before we wrap up, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about what's going on with the rape denying in general, and specifically after October 7th with Hamas raping all those women. And
How
you
do
see so many Canadians.
when you see it, when you see
so
a
many
video,
Canadians coming forward to actively deny rape. I mean, the fact that this is still happening in 2023, that women's
you still don't. You still. There's nothing. There's no recourse for them. It's like, but there's actual video evidence. How can you? I can't.
Anyways,
it upsets me too much to discuss.
On the flip side, we would be very happy to go after all of those people that deny rape as well.
Right.
So that's certainly something we can do here, and people who actively deny, because that's again victimizing the victim and victim shaming and victim blaming.
Right.
That somehow this is some form of resistance or anything. It's horrifying. It's actually horrifying that in this day and age we're still there, and this is where we are. But we see it a lot. We see even sometimes defense counsel putting in defenses that are morally reprehensible.
I can't even imagine how you get up there and you try to say that didn't happen to her, and this person is a shell of a person, and I don't know what
they have a job to do, but they have a job to do, the defense counsel, and I don't envy them, but there is a fine line.
There's a line, and it gets crossed more often than you would think.
Right. And that then delays the process for the victim as well, right? Because if that person's just going to sit there and say, no, that didn't ever happen. And then you have somebody that's now bringing up your sexual history and telling you everything that you've done wrong in your life. And you sent a photo of yourself to XO in person and whatever. And it gets messy. I don't envy.
It's reprehensible.
Yes.
In some cases, you're looking at these things and you're talking to these defense counsel. It's like, okay, there's a line. Let's stay on the right side of the line.
Right. Yeah.
And I think we're good at telling people, and we've had to have discussions where we're looking at them saying, you're not doing this right now. Now you're crossing a line. There are certain things you can say and you can't say. This you cannot say.
Yeah. It took enough of courage for that person to come forward. And now you have to sit there and tell another adult person, like, how about we don't bring that. That's not relevant here in this case. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, I'm happy that we have two really powerhouse females helping victims of sexual assault, for sure, be it male or female. We've explained what types of cases that we can help with. But of course, if you or someone you know was a victim of sexual assault and you've gone to the police and you're looking to see if there's potentially something that we can do to help you out, please feel free to contact us at Diamond and Diamond. Like I said, if we can, there's a will, then we'll find a way, right? So thank you for joining us today, everyone. Thank you, Sandra and Nadia, for covering this very sensitive topic. And we'll see you next time.